Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, where you live and work?
Sure. I'm Margaret Greenberg, and I live in Andover, Connecticut, and that's where my office is, my home.
Right. And what do you do for a living?
I'm the president of the Greenberg Group, which is a consulting company that I founded back in 1997. And I do executive coaching and team development, really what we call OD, the organizational development arena.
Right. And positive psychology and coaching, how's that part of it?
I bring positive psychology into my coaching. I almost look at it as like the lens through which I view the coaching.
Yeah.
More of a strength-based approach, more of a positive approach rather than deficit. So it's in exercises that I bring in, assessments that I bring in, but really more importantly, more of the philosophy or the lens through which I view the coaching engagement.
Right. I'm going to ask you more about that.
Okay.
And what's your background for doing this?
I was in corporate America for like the first 15 years of my career in HR, doing a lot of OD work. And then in '97 started my own practice, consulting to many of the same companies with my former employer, and then of course expanded since then.
Yeah.
And I was the first graduating class at MAP at the University of Pennsylvania in the year 2006. So we were, the pioneers, so to speak. And at the time, positive psychology was just, new. And when I saw the brochure and what it was all about, I wasn't seeking a graduate degree at the time, but it came across my desk and it just spoke to me, and I thought, I want to know more and bring it into an already existing practice.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was starting something, it was bringing in another body of knowledge into an already existing, 7-year coaching and consulting practice.
Right. And so for how long would you say you've been coaching?
Well, I got my coaching certification in '03. Through the Coaches Training Institute.
Yeah.
And I got licensed or certified by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, the kind of the governing body, in 2004, and have been recertified since then because you have to show so many continuing ed credits every 3 years. So I've applied twice now for recertification. So I've been coaching formally since '03, coached prior to that in a corporate setting, and then in my coaching practice, but without the theory, the models.
Right.
It was more really an outgrowth of consulting. That would be consulting with a client on team development or strategic planning or some OD initiative, and you'd end up coaching the client kind of one-on-one through that work.
Yeah.
And then I realized, wow, I really like this. I want to know more, and I want to get certified in coaching.
Yeah.
So the coaching actually came before the MAP.
Right. And can you tell me more about the job that you have now? What kind of jobs do you do with positive psychology and coaching?
I primarily, I'm what's called a preferred coach at like a half a dozen large corporations where, like today I came here, I coached several people at this one company. And oftentimes I also coach their teams, so I'm working with the individual executive, primarily C-suite and VP level, occasionally director level, but most of the people I coach are the leaders of the company or what's called high potentials, the hypos, and so they're giving them coaching as a professional development opportunity. It's not about fixing. I always say I don't do fixer-uppers. It's about people that are already in a leadership role, and maybe they've just stepped into an even bigger role. Their span of control has expanded. They're looking to promote them to the next position, and they want to ready them. So it tends to be those people. And funny, it tends to be people primarily in highly technical domains that I'm bringing positive psychology to. So I tend to coach a lot of people in information technology, the IT world, finance, underwriting, actuarial. It's interesting. The types of people I tend to coach fall into those more technical domains.
Right. And what issues do they bring?
I call them, rather than issues, which is kind of deficit-based, right? I like to call them desired outcomes or objectives, but I tend to call them desired outcomes. That's the language that I use. And I have them imagine that it's 6 months from now. What would be different?
Yeah.
And that discussion also involves their manager and their HR person as well, and we do it very transparent. It's not separately, it's all together. We talk about let's imagine it's 6 months from now, you've just invested in this person. What would be different? And we articulate 2 or 3 things, and they could be around, sometimes they're around executive presence, and then I get them to explore, well, tell me more about that, what is that? Sometimes it's around balancing the strategic with the technical. They might be more of a tactical leader or more of a strategic leader, and they're looking to branch in one way or the other. Yeah. It could be around collaborating across the enterprise, that they need some help. You know, they were leading in a particular functional area, but now the nature of their role requires them in a highly matrixed environment to work across the enterprise. So sometimes it's around collaboration. Sometimes it is things like, you know, public speaking. You know, they have to deliver large employee, you know, or customer meetings, so I might help them with that. So it can run the gamut. Let me see, was there anything else here? Social and emotional intelligence. Sometimes I'll get the call, he's really bright or she's really bright, and the but seems to be around the more interpersonal, how they're, you know, working with others. So sometimes it falls into that domain. And and also the other 2 other areas, succession planning. So it'll be around an executive who now is toward the latter end of their career, and they need to really be thinking about who their successor is, and what do they need to do to develop that successor, and be thinking about what they themselves want to do, you know, for their encore career, so to speak. So that sometimes is an outcome. And then lastly, building a really highly effective team. That's also very common, and I bring that expertise from my previous world of, you know, corporate HR, doing a lot of team development there. Yeah.
And how do you go about it when you coach?
How do I go about it?
Like what happens?
Okay, the process kind of? Well, I do this 4-way meeting with HR, the manager, and the client, where we articulate what the desired outcomes are. And then I put together like a statement of work, you know, which is a couple pages, spells out everything, the terms, the conditions, the frequency. I do a minimum of 6 months, and we typically meet twice a week. Sometimes, like today, you saw I came up here in person to meet the client. Much of it's over the phone. Depends on where they're located. If they're like in New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, I'll do in person. The rest of it's over the phone, or even now I'm using what's called Nefsys technology, which is kind of like Skype, but it's a secure technology that a company actually buys these rooms that we can quote, go into, you know, virtually on your computer. So I use Nefsys technology with a couple clients, and so we meet twice a month for a 6-month period. I do a 3-month check-in with that HR manager and client. All do a 3-way. They complete a written evaluation in advance independently. I then share that with all of them. I'm doing one of those on Thursday, actually. And then I do that again at the end of the engagement. So that keeps people engaged, not just the client, but their manager and HR, who gets to see them in action, you know, every day or every week, involved in the process too. And probably the only difference up front is I'll do a 90-minute, what I call discovery meeting. That's the only meeting that I set the agenda. And I will most likely have them do some assessments prior to that. I have them fill out a client questionnaire. I might do a 360 assessment if one hasn't been done in the last year. And I'll use all that, you know, data throughout our coaching. And other than that, they set the agenda for the coaching sessions based upon whatever those 2 or 3 outcomes were that they articulated up front. And sometimes those get modified over the course of the coaching. Sometimes at the 3-month mark, you know, I ask a question around, you know, would you like to modify these outcomes in any way? And sometimes, yes, sometimes people have, you know, something that's come up during that time that they said, yes, I'd like to focus more over here than here.
And can the person change the outcome, the wishes for the outcomes when the other 2 people are not there?
No, it would happen in that check-in.
Okay.
Because everybody completes the evaluation independently, and they all answer that question. And then when we do the sit-down, which typically is in person, then we have a chance to either everybody said, yeah, let's keep going the way we're going, this is great.
Right.
But if one person, it might not even be the client, it might be the manager who said, no, you know what, I think going forward, focus on these two. But now, it just happened a couple weeks ago. Something occurred in the company, they just acquired another company, and now they really need this person to step up his game around integrating those new people into the company, and so that's going to be a focus around leading change.
Right.
Is going to be a key component of the coaching.
Yeah. And can you tell me what else goes on?
What else goes on? Well, in the upfront, in the discovery, I do you probably are familiar with the Wheel of Life. There's like 8 different domains, and career is just one of them. So even though I'm an executive coach, I do coach the whole person, but they set the agenda, I don't. But we'll do that as a diagnostic up front, and I'll ask them about, their family, their finances, their health. So that diagnostic, that we look at all aspects of their life. And that sometimes identifies another area that they want to work on. Right. But it's not anything that's documented for the company. Right. It becomes more of a sub goal or a sub outcome that they're looking to improve their health, their physical health, or their exercise or things like that. So that is a piece of it as well. So
is that the first session?
In the discovery, and that's 90 minutes.
So you'd have the group meeting with and then you would have the 90-minute discovery. Right. And then you have sessions of how long? An hour. An hour. And
usually about twice a month. Some people, I have one guy right now who, after the first 3 months, and in the evaluation, I asked him, is there anything you'd like to change? Not necessarily around the desired outcomes, but around how this process is working. So rather than waiting till the end, right? Let's talk about it now. And he actually said, Margaret, I'd rather talk to you every week for like 30 minutes, because what he's working on is like the social emotional intelligence, and he wants to keep it like in the forefront of his mind. And he said, I'd rather talk to you every week, for a half hour, and just keep it really present for myself. Right. So I'm flexible.
And that would be...
that's a mix between in-person and phone. Right. Because I'm at this company, usually twice a month. This is a Hartford-based company, so we just changed the frequency. Right. And the other off weeks, we do it by phone.
Right. And so if he sets the agenda, what happens like?
Well, it's interesting because I don't expect my clients to tell me in advance what their agenda is. Some people, because of the way their brains work, they'll send me, Margaret, tomorrow I want to talk about, A, B, and C. Great. I don't expect that. And so some people I'll start the call with, so, what do you want to be coached on today? Usually something along that line. And sometimes people will say, I want to talk about this, this, and this. I also keep notes from the previous calls, so I might say, well, I want to make sure we follow up on this, this, and this, because I'm kind of their, the accountability person, right? I want to make sure that, they did what they said they were going to do. But sometimes, it happened this morning, a guy that I coached, president of a company, I get on the phone, it's Monday morning at 10 o'clock, and I said, so, what are we coaching toward today? I have no idea. I'm like, great! Now anything's possible. We can go anywhere now in this next hour. Like, okay, so he doesn't know. Well, in that hour, we went from his marriage to the board meeting that he had last week to a meeting he was having this afternoon that he needed to prepare for, to an investor call that he has next week and how he wants to be on an investor call.
You mentioned assessments, that you use assessments?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about which ones and how you do it?
Yep. I use, again, depending upon the client and what we're coaching toward, I pretty much always use some kind of strength assessment, whether it's the VIA, Values and Action from Authentic Happiness, or the Strengths Finders assessment, the 2.0 assessment out of that book. I use sometimes the Approaches to Happiness, which is also on the Authentic Happiness site. And then sometimes I use the Optimism test as well. And that's what I did my capstone in, was on optimism, so I'm always very curious about that. And depending upon, and I might not do that up front, I might not do that until 2 or 3 sessions in if I start to see that optimism might be something that's holding him or her back. Yeah. And then that gives you a framework to talk about it, not just the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. No. So that one sometimes I use the grit, especially if somebody has a really big project that they need to see through in a multi-year. Sometimes I'll use that. Let's see. That's pretty much positive psychology related. Probably the only other one is Tom Rath just came out with the well-being book, The 5 Essentials of Well-Being. That pretty much mirrors the Wheel of Life that I do. But I have experimented with that a little bit to see more so that clients can use it with their employees.
Right. And when you experiment, what would you do?
I would say to them, this mirrors the Wheel of Life that you and I have already done. But why don't you take it? It might be something that you want to use with your employees because they can't hire a coach for all of their employees, and that's an assessment that they can do online and then talk about it in a staff meeting and do some peer coaching. So it's more of a tool that the client then can use with his or her team. So those are the positive psychology assessments, and then again, like I said, I do 360s and the HBDI and the Hogan and some other assessment tools too.
Right. And so what happens? Do you send them to the clients, or how do you do it?
I usually send them the link because everything pretty much is electronic now. And in that statement of work that I mentioned up front, I have a section under assessments. And after I've already done the 4-way we've talked, and I'll get a sense of what assessments might I want to use. The social emotional intelligence profile, if that's something that we're working with, I'll have them do that assessment, and that's a 360 or an individual assessment. Right. And so I'll actually tell them in that statement of work which assessments I'd like them to complete. And for some people, I don't have them do it all at once either. It doesn't have to be all done up front. And I'll just say, over the next 6 weeks, I'd like you to take these. And sometimes people have already been what I call assessed to death. Yeah. They've already so you know what, we're only going to do the strengths. Yeah. Because some people, a lot of people haven't done that. But you know what, they've already done so many other assessments. They just want to get into the coaching. Yeah. So they don't need it to do it for my benefit. It's for their benefit. Yeah. So that's really a judgment call, how many and when they have to complete it by. It's not like I need this body of information to start coaching.
No. And so do they bring it back to you or send it to you, or what happens?
Yeah. Typically, like for the strengths or the VIA. Actually, with the VIA now, I use the consultant version. Are you familiar with that? Where I can purchase a consultant code. Yeah. I again send them this instructions electronically. That report gets sent to me. It's a PDF. Yeah. That gets sent to me. I then send it to them in anticipation of a call where I'll say, okay, take a look at this. You tell me when you want to discuss the results. Because again, they set the agenda. That's really important for these calls. So they might have something really pressing, this board meeting or this big thing that's happening in their company. If that takes precedence over a discussion of their strengths, well, guess where I'm going to go, right? They're in control. They're setting the agenda. So we'll discuss that generally within the first month. I mean, generally.
Right.
But they decide. But it's all done electronically.
And when you discuss it, so what do you do?
Well, like with the strengths, I do a card sort exercise. I actually wrote about that as a practitioner. I wrote about it on Positive Psychology News Daily, how to do a card sort exercise. Mm-hmm. And what I'll do, whether I do it in person or over the phone, I'll have them take their top 5 strengths, write each strength on a card, and then we have a discussion around it. Okay, so tell me, Abby, which out of all these 5, which is most core to who you are? Tell me about that. And so you'll pick one and you'll tell me, and I'll ask you, well, how have you used that strength today even, or in the last week, at home, at work, in your community? How have you used it? And then I'll have them pick another one. So now let's pick another one. Tell me how you think that fits in with this. And so we go through all 5 and we build. Oftentimes it looks like a picture. It might look like a wheel, spokes. It might look like an arrow. It might look like a foundation of a house. Some people's, look like a person. They got the arms and the legs and the head. So who knows what it's going to look like? But that's a way to talk about it and give them a visual, at the same time.
Right.
And then generally there's an assignment related to that we co-create. I'm not one to like just give random assignments. So we'll co-create the assignment together, and we might decide, all right, so in the next 2 weeks, between now and when we talk again, which is when the real work of coaching happens, right, in between these calls, all right, how can we like turn up the volume on one of these strengths? Let's pick one. Given what what's on your agenda for the next 2 weeks, what's happening at work and outside of work, which one of these strengths do you think you could use even more and turn the volume up? Okay, and then we talk about that. All right, then between now, I want you to come back to the next call and tell me about it. Brag about how you've used, this strength in a new and different way, or used it even more. So that's one of the applications of the strengths. And I will say strengths is something I bring into the coaching at different points in time. Once I know what they are, and I write them down, on a sheet here, so I always have it with me. I might say, as I'm coaching someone, so Evie, which one of your strengths do you think would really help you build a relationship with this person? Or which one of your strengths do you think would really serve you well in this particular situation that you're wrestling with? And so I'm always kind of weaving it back into the discussion, to really, so they own their strengths.
Right. And I was thinking about, so how do you hold them accountable next time they come and they say, you talked about this last time?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do, and I can send you this too, I have a form that I created for every coaching call, and it's divided into thirds. The top third is follow-up from our last call. The middle third is what we're talking about in this call. And the bottom third is commitments they make for our next meeting. So I always go back to that, before my next, session with them, and I look at the bottom third and say, okay, what did they commit to at that last session? And that comes up to the top of the next session's form. And regardless of what their agenda is, I also know there's a few things I want to follow up on, and I'll ask.
So, ask what?
So tell me about, you committed last time to doing A, B, and C. How did you do? On a scale of 1 to 10, how successful were you? Or whatever the topic is.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, when we tell people, we're more likely to do something when we tell others, right? So they've told me now that this is what they've committed to. And now I'm following up. And sometimes, they didn't get to it. So then we'll talk about, okay, so what got in the way? And is this still important to you? And, we coach from there too. I'm not there to, wrap their knuckles, that they didn't, with a ruler like the teacher. No. But there is some accountability there.
And when does this happen? At the beginning of the session or in the middle of the session?
It depends. It's usually either at the beginning or the end. Because when we start off and I say, so what's on your agenda today? Sometimes I also say, well, I want to tell you how I did on my homework, and sometimes people will be very forthcoming, and then other people will not. They'll say, oh, I really got to talk to you about, this, what's going on. And I'll say, okay, well, I want to make sure we leave, 10 minutes, either up front or at the end, to talk about, your commitments you made last time. So again, they choose, okay, all right, let's start with that. Okay, great. If not, 10 minutes before the end, I'll say, okay, we have about 10 more minutes left. I want to make sure we have time to follow up on these items.
Right.
So I'm more like facilitating that discussion.
Right.
But I still think it's about choice for them.
Yeah. What about interventions? What do you do to...
Okay, well, first of all, I don't call them interventions because, again, that has a very deficit kind of, right? Oh, we're going to intervene. We're going to do an intervention. So I like to think them more of like exercises, right? And again, I know it's just a little nuance there, but I wouldn't refer to them as interventions in a business setting. That would really scare people off. So the ones that I use that have been tested, I use the best possible future self exercise. I've used positive portfolio with some, again, not all, these are kind of pick and choose. Positive portfolio with clients that really are trying to, really want to develop a particular emotion, more, and I'll have them do that as an assignment. The 3 blessings, although again, I don't call it that, I call it like 3 good things. So I've used that many times. And also, and I'm pretty sure this is based on Sonia Lubomirski's work, and I don't know if she calls it this, the Hope Letter. Is it Sonia's work?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure I even know it.
Well, and maybe it's one that I've just kind of developed. I don't know. I'll send it to you. I've adapted it, but I call it the Hope Letter, and using kind of hope theory as a backdrop. It's the very last assignment that I give, that I ask pretty much all my clients to do. It's actually the next to the last. I give the assignment at the next to the last coaching session. They send it to me at the last, along with their evaluation. And then I mail it back to them a year later. And it's a way to stay connected. And it's a way that it's just amazing, like what people write down in a year later, and how many of those things have actually come to fruition. And so that's one that I do use that consistently as a way to kind of close, the coaching engagement. And so those are the exercises that I use that fall into that, positive psychology. Wheel of Life, Prospective Coaching, those are more, I think, coaching tools than positive psychology tools.
And you said pick and choose, so what did you mean by that?
Meaning, again, it depends on the outcome that the client is looking to achieve and what we're coaching toward. That, again, it's not that I give these at any set time within the coaching, but I'm trying to think of 3 good things. I just gave that, I don't know, last week. This particular client was in a very, a lot of chaos at work, a lot of uncertainty. Things were, not good, okay? And so I thought, you know what? He needs to focus in on the good things. Okay, he can ruminate over all those other things that he really can't control. It's really outside of his scope. So I thought, you know what? He needs to focus in on the really good things that are going on. And there are some really good things within his organization, and he needs to go there. So I gave it as an assignment, that between now and when we call again, I want you to every day, either in the morning, and we talked about when he would do it, in the morning or at night, write down 3 good things that happened today. And we'll see, we'll coach to it in 2 weeks. So it tends to be more extemporaneous, like in the moment, when it just, wow, that would be a really good exercise for this person to do, so that he doesn't get all caught up in the negativity.
And then can you give other examples of other exercises that you've given? So for what situations would you give which one? Yeah,
like the best possible future self. That particular exercise, which is a writing exercise, I've used that when, like, remember I mentioned earlier about the clients who are nearing the end of their career and they're developing a succession plan for their organization as well as for themselves. I'll often do the best possible future self exercise. And have them do that writing exercise 3 days in a row. I always have them send it to me. So I have it too. And then I have them read it to me out loud, on the phone, if it's, by phone or in person. And so that exercise really gets them to think beyond, today and who they want to be. And can really serve as a platform then for some real action planning, post that writing exercise
right.
on what they want to create for themselves.
Yeah.
Not just at work, but all of their selves.
Right.
You know, as parent, as spouse, as son or daughter, community leader, you know, whatnot.
Yeah. And do you do some exercise in the session or always between the sessions?
It depends. For writing exercises, obviously, I give them the assignment. Let me think, are there any that we do in the session itself? I might brainstorm with them in the session, like for Positive Portfolio, I might say, okay, so if this is the emotion, what are some things that you associate? You know, if one of the things you want to create more is, you know, calmness. You know, like they're so crazy, they're flying here, they're flying there, they don't have a minute to themselves. All right, you want to create some more calmness and, you know, serenity, and you're like, okay, what do you associate with that? So I might get them to brainstorm it in the actual session, and then, okay, now I want you to go collect those things. Go collect that spa brochure, or go collect that music, that instrumental piece of music that you really enjoy listening to. But I might do the brainstorming in the session itself.
Right.
I tend to do a lot of perspective coaching in the session itself.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, perspective coaching is when someone brings to you a particularly challenging person or situation. Okay, it could be directed to an individual or more of a situation, and you get them to articulate, like in one word, how are they currently thinking and feeling about that situation or that person. Name it. You know, are you frustrated? Are you excited? Are you scared? You know, is it painful? Is it you know, challenging? Is it the best thing that ever happened to you? You know, whatever it is, and that's your current perspective. And then you get them to try on other perspectives.
Yeah.
And in the process. And so, you know, oftentimes when people are experiencing something challenging, they have an inability to like brainstorm, right? Their brains kind of shut down. They can't even think of another perspective. So I might have them stand up, you know, okay, so let's get unstuck, let's stand up. I might say, okay, what's another perspective? And they'll say, I don't know, Margaret, I don't know. Okay, good, then let's make one up. I'll throw one out. What would your future self perspective be on this? You 20 years from now. How would Abby think about this 20 years from now? Well, 20 years from now is probably about this big, right? And so that's the perspective of time. What would be your best friend's perspective on this? What would he or she tell you? And so those are exercises that I'll do in the moment, you know, in the coaching engagement or the session.
Yeah. And when you pick and choose, do you have some principles, or is it based on intuition, or what do you do?
It's probably more intuition and experience, having coached, you know, for almost 10 years now. Probably a lot of it's intuition, but experience as well.
And what have you learned from your experience?
That you have to be willing to dance in the moment with your clients, that you never know how they're going to come to the call, and how they left the last call or the last session may not be anywhere near where they are today. So you just have to be open to go wherever it is that they want to go, and gently guide the discussion if you think it needs guiding.
Yeah.
And sometimes just let it go, and knowing when to just let it go. And that, I think, is intuition.
Yeah. What about knowledge sharing? Do you sometimes share the knowledge that you have from positive psychology or coaching or consulting?
I do, and I know that's, again, some people don't. But again, you think about the clients that I work with, they're like data-driven guys and women. They like evidence. They, like data. And models. Models is a very common in the business world to share, business models. But you can also share coaching models as well. So I jotted down a few that I use. I talk a lot about flow, and where that comes up in a coaching discussion is generally not so much around their state of flow, but they'll be talking about a particular employee that seems to have kind of lost their jive, their motivation, and they're trying to figure out, you know, what is it about this person? I really want to help them. And so I'll draw like the flow, you know, with the skills and challenge. I said, well, let's talk about it. Let's try to diagnose what's going on here. Is it a case of, you know, high skill and low challenge, and they're kind of bored and checked out, or have you actually given them too high of a challenge given their skill set? And so I'll use that model and I'll have them just sketch it out. I'll use like the active constructive responding, that particular model, and I'll get, even over the phone, you can say, okay, draw a 2x2 box. Every business leader knows models that are a 2x2 box, okay, and walking them through that. What else do I do? Oh, the ABCD, even E, the energy piece. I'll use that around disputing. I'll use that and say, well, let's try this ABCDE model, okay? Tell me about the adversity. What is it? Okay, what's your belief around that? What are the consequences of that belief? Okay, now let's dispute it. That's not true because. And I've actually had clients tell me they've used that particular model with their own employees. So a lot about coaching is being able to transfer that knowledge. Yeah. So sometimes I don't tell them in the moment, but afterwards at the end, I'll say, you know what we just did there? We just did something called ABCDE, or we just did prospective coaching. Now, do you want me to break it down for you so you can use this with your employees? And most people say, yeah, tell me about it. So sometimes I tell them about it up front. Sometimes I do it, and then I share the model with them so they can use it with their employees again and again. They don't need me, you know, to use it. You teach them how to use it. So I'm all about that.
Right.
What other? Oh, I'll use a lot around the 3-to-1 positive negative ratio. Yeah. And even the 5-to-1 in marriages when we get into the arena of marriages. But the 3-to-1, particularly in team, some of the team-based work that I do, that particular piece of research and what high-performing teams, what's the ratio between positive and negative? Well, here we go again. That particular model is really helpful to people. In fact, I've even used it in the moment. Where I remember one team I went into and I was doing a follow-up session like 6 months later, and I said, so let's go around the room as like an icebreaker and tell me, you know, how much progress have you made, you know, since I was here last? You know, the first guy goes, and he says, well, really, you know, we didn't do everything we said we were going to do. And you know, the next person says, you know, well, we were late on delivering this project. We thought we'd get it in on the, you know, second quarter. It didn't happen until the third. And somebody else, we go around the room and we get to the sixth, and it's like going down a rat hole. It was like, you could, the energy in the room, you could just feel it just good. And I was like, okay, this is good. I'm really glad I asked that question. We get to the sixth guy and he said, well, you know, when you think about all that we had on our plate and everything that's transpired since then, I actually think we've accomplished a lot. We did this, and he started naming the things. So that, again, in the moment, felt right to say, all right, well, very interesting. Let's take a time out for a moment. Let me just share with you what I think just happened here. And I said, there's something called a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative emotions on a team. And what researchers found is that really the healthiest teams, the most high-performing teams, are 3-to-1. What we just experienced here was 5-to-1, 5 negative to 1 positive. So I said, let's do a redo. Let's start now here, and now let's tell me how much progress have you made since we got here? So it was like an in-the-moment kind of situation to introduce a little piece of positive psychology research, but in a real way that they could identify. If I had started the meeting with that, well, let me tell you about the 3-to-1 magic ratio. It's like blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But in the moment, it was, they got it. It's like, wow, yeah, we have a tendency to do that.
And other ways you share knowledge when you share it?
Articles. I do send a lot of, not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but articles as I read them, whether it's on, you know, Positive Psychology News Daily or something else. I will forward them on to, again, not all my clients. It depends on, it's more targeted, what they're working on. This is what we talked about last week, or so I'll share information in articles. What else would I do? I've invited them to events. Like I brought one of my clients to a map summit that we had early on, and came and spoke as a panel on how she was applying it in her setting. So I've invited them to things like that.
Right. What about flexibility? Do you change the things that you've learned, the things that you've read about?
I do, and I tend not to call it positive psychology coaching. I know you mentioned in here, as a positive psychology coach, I don't really bill myself that way. I was already a coach, right, before I went to MAP. So I don't really talk about positive psychology. Occasionally I might, introduce something. I'll say, well, this is what we know from positive psychology research, but that's seldom.
Yeah.
I really see myself as a translator, translating the science to the community, the business community that I serve.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of translating, and I mentioned earlier, like the 3 blessings, I call that the 3 good things. Appreciative inquiry. I tried to introduce that to a company. As soon as I changed the language from appreciative inquiry to, well, let's talk about what's going right. And let's ask some pointed questions in our business planning sessions around what's going right versus focusing on what's going wrong. Or what if we study, you want to improve retention? Well, why don't we pick your office that has the highest retention, and let's go study that and find out why do they have such high retention there and get great results, versus let's go out to that field office and find out why their retention is awful there, right? So I tend to translate the science and not even use some of the terms.
So what other things do you translate? Like, what other words do you normally translate?
Words? Well, I really don't call it positive psychology coaching. I call it more strength-based coaching. The strengths is something I think that people can identify with. Yeah. And, we talk a lot about, they're really familiar with weaknesses in the corporate world. Yeah. Okay, so now you come in and let's talk about strengths. So that language seems to work well. Yeah. So that's another translation that I do. Let's see. Are there any other ones?
Words that you avoid, or?
Well, interventions.
Yeah.
I mentioned that. Appreciative inquiry, I tend to stay away from that language. More strengths. Yeah, I can't really recall.
Mm-hmm. And when you change the words or the assessments or the interventions, what do you do? Like, how do you know how to change them?
Well, like the 3 good things. It's the same exercise. It's just not calling it 3 blessings, right? It's 3 good things. So I don't really change the exercise at all. It's the same exercise, just calling it something else. The appreciative inquiry, it's using the principles. In fact, even when I've done presentations on what it's all about, I will describe and use many of the same language about what it is, but I just don't call it appreciative inquiry, because that totally tripped people up.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the clients I serve.
Yeah.
Their business, they tend to be, like I said, more left brain, more technical.
Right.
So I see myself as a translator.
Right. And so you don't change the assessments, or you don't change the...
Not the assessments.
Exercises, or...
No, not the assessments at all. The only thing I've done is I now use that consultant code for the VIA, because I really like how the data is presented in that report versus the generic one that you get online that's just your 4 strengths. Yeah. But that's I like how that's presented, and I think it's presented in a way that business people, can understand.
Yeah.
And it's got the model in the back, with the 4 quadrants, and so, it makes for a good discussion.
And how do you discuss it? What do you do?
Well, I send it to people in advance, and I'll say, let's talk about this, to review it, with highlighter in hand, and we'll talk about it. And then when they come to the actual meeting, that's where I'll use the card sort. that I mentioned. Sometimes I'll do the card sort, and then we'll also look at, okay, so what are your bottom? You want to take a look at your bottom too, and you know, what does that tell you? And is there anything there that you might actually want to, you know, develop even more or amplify it a little bit more? And we look at the ratio between kind of the head and heart, you know, so that's a good discussion. Where do they tend to cluster?
Yeah.
So it's more of a, you know, a discussion.
Right. And if they do want to amplify some of the bottom strengths, what then?
We'll talk about, you know, not to lose sight of the strengths. In fact, I actually believe some of your strengths can actually help you, right? So if one of your strengths is, you know, the learner, to use the Strengths Finders language, a learner strength, you know, that might actually help you learn even more about this bottom strength. Well, so what is it about curiosity or something that you want to know even more? So if they want to work on one of those, that's okay. It's not where I'd spend all my focus and energy. But somebody might say, well, you know, wow, love and the capacity to love is my number, you know, 20 or something. And, you know, I really would like to lift that up a little bit. Well, you know what? You're working 90 hours a week and you're not finding a lot of time to, you know, find love, right? or show love. And so let's talk about that. Yeah. You know, so it might be a question of balance for some things too. Right. But I want them to really celebrate their strengths.
And in what way?
Own them, like I'll give them a strength certificate, you know, and when I go into their office, I'll see it. It's like posted up on the wall and stuff as a reminder, as a way. I'm all about, you know, having reminders for people, structures to help them remember what it is they want to remember, right? Yeah. So having something like that they have to look at every day, their strengths, and how am I using that today?
What other reminders do you use?
Sometimes, have you heard about structures in coaching, where you give people a structure to remind them of things? So it could be something visual like that, right? A strength certificate. Mm-hmm. But for example, I'll ask people if we've done, you know, some coaching on a relationship, right, with a particular person in their corporation or outside of work, that they really want to grow and foster. And I'll say, well, how are you going to remember, you know, that's really important to you? And I'll just remember. I'm like, no, you're not. How are you really going to remember, you know? And I'll say, okay, pick something that's always with you, whether it's, you know, your portfolio or a piece of jewelry or something that you generally always have on your person. And just by touching it will remind you that that's going to be your trigger, that's really important to you, or that person's really important to you, or this topic is really important. So you might, I use my ring as a structure to remind me, you know, my husband, and no, yes, it's a ring that, you know, that he gave me. It's a reminder of how important he is in my life, and as, you know, busy as I am at times, all I have to do is go like this, and, you know, I know he's with me. So you can use structures like that with clients around any topic that's near and dear to them. Sticky notes. Yeah. You know, I have people that put sticky notes inside their portfolio before they're about to give a big presentation. That who do they want to be? You know, and they put down this name. This is who they want to be when they get up in front of that group. And well, you know, there it is, right there. And all they have to do is open up that portfolio, and there's their, you know, reminder. So I really think reminders. Structures are helpful to people.
And I have some questions about other things that make coaching effective. Like, what do you do to make the clients expect good outcomes, like believe in you and the way that you work? And
okay. Well, is this about the established credibility?
Yeah.
Well, I have. I do believe it's all about relationships that you build. So like this relationship that you saw here today, it's a long-term relationship. It's having the credibility, the credentials, right? So I think it's really important that, you know, I'm certified in coaching. I just don't put out a shingle that I'm a coach, that I'm certified. I continue to get recertified, you know, every 3 years. You know, I have my website, my bio. that tells about, my credentials. So I think all of those things are important. I also think the relationships you build, if you're doing corporate coaching, the relationships you build with HR, because human resources are often your brokers. They're brokering the coaching relationship for the client. So you really need to keep them, in the loop, informed about what you're doing, never taking on a coaching engagement, which might come out, you meet somebody in a meeting and say, oh, we really want you to coach me. I would never just do that without circling back to HR and having the discussion and getting their manager involved. So I think that really is important. I also think having really clear goals, or what I call desired outcomes, and get those articulated up front with input from those two other parties, not just the client, but the manager and HR is really important. And having a way to measure the effectiveness, which I do in my evaluations. And I use those 4 levels of measurement from ROI.
Okay,
the ROI of coaching. So there's reaction, right? Did you like it? Are you getting value? Those kinds of things, which really don't tell you much. And then the second level is learning. What have you learned? And again, I structure all my questions around the desired outcomes for each one of these. And I can send you a sample ROI of coaching evaluation. And then the third level is application. How are you actually applying these things against your goals? And then the fourth is business impact. What kind of impact are you actually having on the business? Either, improving sales or lowering costs or improving retention or whatever metrics that we're using. So I think that's really important because coaching is an expensive form of development, and the company has to know that they're spending their limited development dollars in a really positive way. So I think that's another way to ensure that progress is being made. And then following up with people. Even though I do a 6-month engagement, some people obviously go longer. They get the agreement to continue the coaching. But even if they don't, because I'm a preferred coach at a limited number of corporations, when I'm there, when I know I'm going into a company and I have a half-hour break in between sessions or an hour or whatever, I email my previous clients. Last week, I call it a walk and talk with this guy who I coached. We haven't coached since a year ago, June maybe. But I'm at his company a couple times a month. And so when I'm there, I'll say, hey, you want to go for a walk and talk? And we take a couple laps around the building and just, he just got a new job. And, I like to stay connected to my clients, and I like to know, what's happening in their life. And again, not just to get more business. I mean, I really, truly enjoy, connecting with people. So I'm there anyways. So, I've got this break in my schedule, and I'll send that out to, former clients and see, does anybody want to, meet and talk? And we do, and it's great.
So that's not a coaching conversation when you walk and talk?
It is, but it's not, the formal coaching has ended. But now, I'm there, and I'm just checking in, see how they're doing and progress and what's new. And tell me about this new role, you just got. And so it's not formal coaching.
But is it a helping conversation?
Yes, absolutely. And at the end of this one last week, one of the things that came out of the discussion, I asked him, I said, so what are you most proud of? Right now, what are you most proud of? And, he began to share what was going on, in his life and how he came to this position. And, it's very exciting. And, it was just a great, reflective time for him to have somebody that he could share that with and share it in such a way that I'm truly, happy for him. And it's not, I'm not a peer. I'm not somebody that feels like, oh, geez, I should have had the job, right? I mean, it's just, he could truly, be himself. But then through the conversation too, we discovered that he's really not paying attention to his health right now, his physical health, because things are everything's happening and it's busy. And so, he committed to, getting to the gym, and I'm like, okay, so how many times do you want to get to the gym? So I started to get down to the specifics, and I'll send him, an email this week saying, so, how did you do last week? And again, it's just out of, I have relationships with people. And, you know, I want to know how they're doing.
Yeah.
So I keep, I do in my Outlook reminder, I'll plug in like every 3 months, follow up with so-and-so, follow up with so-and-so. And it'll pop up on my screen and I'll say, oh, follow up with Ebby. Oh, great. You know, I'll see what Ebby's up to. And sometimes it results in more business, but that's not the intention. It's just to, like, the relationship is built and you care about these people.
Yeah. Well, what do you do regarding the working alliance, the working relationship? Like other things you do to build the relationship?
Other things I do to build the relationship.
Like when you meet them, or in the first coaching session, or how you maintain it? Or?
Yeah. I'm thinking. I would say, you know, we do, sometimes we do like actual meetings, you know, like this, but sometimes we'll do dinner, like tonight when I meet that woman I just did a 360 for. It's a follow-up 360, it's a year later 360. We're doing it over dinner.
Right.
You know, rather than during the workday, you know, she's here on business anyways from Michigan, and so, you know, let's do it over dinner. And again, I don't look at that as, oh, I gotta go have dinner. I'm really looking forward to seeing her and sharing the results. I emailed her the 360, you know, last week, so she had time. She said, oh, this will be my plane reading. And, you know, tonight we'll have a nice dinner and have a conversation around it.
Yeah.
So I think being willing, you know, to be flexible. I do try to get people out of their building. Sometimes today, people like don't take lunches anymore. They just like work like all the time. So usually at about the 2-month mark into the coaching, I'll say, you know what, next week, why don't you book an hour and a half and I'll pick you up outside and we'll go out to lunch. And they're like, out to lunch? I never go out to lunch. I go, well, we're going out. How about we go out to lunch? And that's like a real break for people, just to like get them out of their surrounding. So I like doing that too.
And other things you do to create a good relationship?
I don't know. It's so much about like who I am. It's hard to even break down. I mean, I know all their assistants. I mean, you saw today with Linda. I have relationships with the assistants too, because they're the ones that do all the scheduling, and so I care about them too, and acknowledge them and have them be a part of it. Because sometimes the assistants can really help with some of the, assignments and whatnot. So kind of, keeping them in the loop is important too.
And then you say, so it's who you are. So who are you? Like, what would it take to be good at it?
To be good at coaching?
Yeah, to be good at establishing relationship the way that you do. Some people might not be able to, or would like to learn, or.
Well, I think a lot of it is that social and emotional intelligence, which I'm certified in that instrument too. It's about being other-focused, being first of all self-aware of your own, but then being other-focused and really sitting side by side with that person, and it's not about you. And it's about the other person and being really present. I can't tell you how important it is not to be distracted, with your phone, or even when you're on a call. I never coach from my office. In front of my computer, I always coach from either my couch in my office or my easy chair, ottoman chair and ottoman. Because I don't want to be distracted by an email or anything. So I think being really present, people can tell that you're there for them and you care about them and you care about this relationship. I will tell you this, at the holidays, I do bring them home-baked cookies. Right. Because I make Swedish cookies.
Yeah.
And so my local clients get the handmade cookies that they love, and then my clients that are remote get from a wonderful Italian bakery, but they do get that. What are some other little things? I send out a New Year's card every year, not a holiday card, but a New Year's kind of new beginning. So I do that, and I send that to not just current clients but past clients to maintain relationships.
Right.
And a lot of my business, or most of my business, is all word of mouth anyway, so you want to stay connected with people.
Right.
But I don't know, Evie, it's kind of hard. I should have given that more thought.
No, it's fine.
It just comes so naturally. You have to enjoy, to do this work, you have to truly enjoy people and not look at it as an interruption. Today, when I knew I was coming up here, I immediately thought of a guy that I coach here that I have a call with tomorrow, but heck, I'm there anyway. Let's do it in person. And, he's so appreciated it. He changed his schedule around, because I was coming up. He goes, oh, I can change that. And, we had a great, coaching session.
Yeah. And what do? You mentioned the reminders. So how do you help them stay engaged in the process of working towards their goals?
Okay.
So.
Well, I mentioned the structure, right?
Yeah.
Structures. I also mentioned, I have on the inside of, my coaching folder what their outcomes are. They're always there. They're always right in front of me, and hopefully in front of them too. But knowing that they're going to have to complete an evaluation, not at the end, but at that 3 mark, that holds them to it as well, because they've communicated it to their boss, they've communicated it to HR, they've communicated it to me. There's some accountability there, and people want to demonstrate, right, success. So I think, when we do coaching in the dark, so to speak, where nobody knows except me what we're working on, I don't think we do our clients any favor. Even when I've done a few private engagements where they're corporate, executives, but actually they want me to coach them out of the company, so they're contracting me independently, not through my preferred companies. That would be a conflict of interest. But from the outside, like I coached this doctor last year who wanted to be coached out of this hospital. And, well, she didn't have a manager or an HR person, right? She's contracting with me independently. So I said to her, okay, you have an assignment. You need to go out and tell 20 people that you want to be coached out of this job. She said, I can't tell that. That can't get out on the street. I said, okay, so you don't tell your colleagues. I said, but you need to tell your family members. You need to tell some people that this is what your intention is. Otherwise, your chances of actually acting on that are diminished. So that's your assignment. Go tell 20 people. And at first she was like, all right, how about 10? And that was still more than she was ever going to tell, right? So I think having that accountability is one of the things that really works well to keep people on track, on progress, knowing that they're going to be measured.
Yeah. And what do they say to you when they come back? What feedback do they give you?
In terms of what they found helpful, yeah. The thing that I hear the most, and again I see this in the written evaluations, is having an objective third party. Just an objective third party that has no, opinion necessarily on, who they are and what they're doing, and just that objective third party is one that I see a lot. And the focusing in on strengths. Yeah. That when people say what was most helpful, that is such a paradigm shift for companies today, and it's changing. I mean, more companies are, but that's been most valuable. And then the third thing is that I coach the whole person. That I have a question there on the evaluations. Were there any unexpected outcomes? Okay, so we have the desired outcomes, but were there any unexpected? And the theme that has popped up there is I didn't realize how much the coaching, what I was learning about myself and my colleagues and at work, would actually help my relationship with my spouse. Right. So spouse, male or female, has been an unexpected outcome, because so many of these things you can apply to all of your relationships. So I do coach the whole person, and I think that's something that, when you're contracting in a business environment, they don't always know, right? Until, in the initial session, I'll say, well, we do the wheel of life. We can talk about any of these things. We have our outcomes, but we can talk about any of these things as they come up. So that's been most helpful too, is that I coach the whole person, not just the professional work persona.
Right. And Are there other ways that you can see that they're progressing, like you mentioned the evaluation and stuff?
Yeah, the evaluations that way. I also measure it by, are they, getting promoted? If they're a director or VP, are they over time, like this guy that just got this new role, are they now elevated even more because they've really stepped into their leadership? So I look at promotion as well, or just broader responsibilities that people are given. Yeah. So I mean, that's more of a business impact kind of measure. Yeah. But I do look at that. To somebody that I was coaching that was the VP of technology, and now they're the CIO of technology. It's like, oh, again, I can't take credit for that, but did coaching somehow play a role in that? Yeah, I think so, and they would agree too.
And if you mention the mechanisms, so what causes the changes? What would be your best guess?
I jotted down clear goals. So you've got to know where you're going, right? So having clear goals, I think, is one cause. That they have confidence. Like I don't ever want a client to think that they can't make a move unless they call their coach. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to create that kind of codependency or whatever you call it. I want them to really feel empowered. So I do think that's one of the causes that they. And I don't call it self-efficacy. There's another one that I don't use. I call it more confidence in your leadership ability. I think that's really important. That's one of the causes, that they feel more empowered, that they feel more confident, and that comes from within. I'm just drawing it out. It's there. It's just I'm bringing it forward by having them uncover their strengths and focusing on moments in their life that really mattered and that were positive. Right. Were there anything else? I already talked about the structures.
Mentioned accountability.
Accountability, I mentioned accountable to someone else, and being really intentional. Coaching is so much about making intentional choices and doing intentional things. So carrying that intentionality forward. Oftentimes people write about that in their hope letter at the end, and I'll ask them even in that kind of closing session. So what's the theme for this year ahead? If you had to pick one word, what's the theme, for 2012? And it could be anything, but intentionality often comes up because that's so much of what the coaching's been about. That I'm really going to carry that forward, and by staying in touch with them, I find out if they do.
And so you've mentioned choices a couple of times, and can you explain a little bit more about choice and intentionality? Like what's it about? Like what is it that they've learned
about choice and intentionality? Yeah. That understanding kind of your current, I'll use Prospective Coaching as an example, understanding your current situation first. And I always believe we all have a choice. There's always the choice to do nothing. The do nothing strategy, people in business use it all the time. Just do nothing. And what will happen if we do nothing? But what will happen if we make an intentional change? And that change, I always try to get people to articulate, what's the smallest change you can make that would have the biggest positive impact? And it could be just like this big, and being intentional about it and choosing to do that. So, this guy that I was on the phone with today, he's leaving on a business trip tomorrow. And he said, I need to go home and pack tonight. And I really should be with my family, though. I really want to be present. And I'm like, okay, so what's the smallest change that you could make that would have the biggest, impact? And he said, if I just pack, like, not right when I get home, which is when he wants to do it, because he wants to just like get it out of the way, but really his family, it's like when his family's awake and there, and just know that, you can do it later, but when you walk through that door, you're making a choice to be really present with your family, and the packing can happen at 9 o'clock or whatever. So again, it was only this big, but it was intentional versus doing something out of just habitual. He would come home from work and, you know, just go right to packing, you know, for his next gig.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I just haven't thought of it before, so that was why I was. And what do you do yourself to keep updated and train yourself and develop this profession?
Yeah, I do have to stay updated, not only because I'm a learner and I love to keep learning, but to continue my ICF credentials. You have to have, you know, so many continuing education credits, you know, every 3 years. So I do that through, you know, workshops, conferences, related specifically to positive psychology now. I'll do things like, you know, the IPA conference, the MAP summits, the Positive Psychology News Daily, which I write for and read. So I stay up to some of the SIGs. We used to have, I haven't followed that lately. We used to have a coaching SIG, a special interest group, that I've kind of lost track of where that is right now. I used to be really involved in it a couple of years ago, and then it kind of fell by the wayside, and I need to follow up on that. Maybe you can connect me to that. So that's what I use today. And then, you know, networking with my colleagues. I'm co-authoring a book with Senya Maiman, who's doing her PhD out at Stanford now, and staying connected, you know, with certain folks in that community. Is a way to, you know, and the quarterly calls, you know, that we have with researchers, I'm always on those. So yeah.
And so when you learn something new, how do you integrate it in the way that you already work?
Yeah, well, that's what this is. That's my job aid, because sometimes, you know, you can't recall everything, right? No. And there was a book that we read in MAP. I can't recall it now, but it was all about, you know, what's the one thing, it's Buckingham's book, and what's the one thing you want to remember out of all this body of information? And for me, creating like a job aid like this is a way. I staple this inside, you know, every client's, you know, folder, and I just keep adding to it. And the font keeps getting smaller and smaller because I only want one page. And so, like, when I highlighted this, these are just the positive psychology ones. These are other, you know, assessment tools and other things that I'm always adding, you know, to my toolkit. So having this is a structure, this is an example of a structure, a job aid. That's how I take, you know, whether it was an article I read or an exercise that I heard about, and be able to actually, you know, apply it and use it, rather than, you know, after a call or a coaching session say, oh, geez, I should have mentioned that. Well, this is right inside my folder.
So it would be the same for several clients, like this piece of paper, and then...
It's always the same, but I pick and choose what I use. Again, given what their outcomes are. So that's how I've integrated it. I'm very practical. I also have in my office, a one-page kind of landscaped of models. I mean, all the models that I use. Landscaped, you know, meaning it's like this. You know, and of team development modules, leadership, not modules, models, leadership models, team development models, coaching models. This is just coaching. And again, that's a visual for me to remember.
So where are they, on the wall? Or?
It's just on the wall in my office, and as I'm designing, you know, I might be designing a workshop, and you know, I've done so many over the years, you know, and I might, you know, not recall, oh, you know, I really should use that, you know, ladder of abstraction, or I really should use that strengths model, or I really should use, you know, and it's just one place to have it all, so it's fresh in my mind. So that's how I integrate my learning. And when I go to a conference or something, on the flight back, I go through my notes. And sometimes I do this even in the session itself. I'll draw like light bulbs, and that's an idea I can apply immediately. And I highlight it, and then I get back to the office, and I'll do again a one-pager. I came out of the training and development world. That's where I started my career, and so that's where we learned how to make job aids. They were ways to help people, you know, in their job. So I still make them for myself.
Right. And you mentioned before that you had some opinions about positive psychology coaching.
Yeah, the advice.
No, I was thinking about what was special about positive psychology coaching.
Oh, what's special about it is that I know and can draw upon the science. I think that's what's special about it. It's not just purely intuition and trying things out. That there are things that have been tested that I know about and I can draw upon it in the moment, with my coaching, clients. So I think that's what is unique about it. Yeah. It's the body of science, it's the body of evidence that we can draw upon that coaching has never had before.
No.
So that to me is really special, and that's why I did it. Was in that first class because it so intrigued me. I thought that's what's missing. That's what I want to know about. I already have the coaching skills and the framework, but I don't have the science behind it. Mm. So that's what was really appealing to me.
Right.
And that is unique and different.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. And are there things we have not talked about that are important to understand the way that you work?
No, I think we touched upon it when I said just how important relationships are.
Yeah.
And maintaining those relationships. I think that's really important. And probably the other thing is how you live your own life. I always say, who needs a stressed out coach?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so you have to take care of yourself and what centers you, in your health and your family and your learning, and not that you don't have to be a role model for these people. They're already amazing people and wonderful leaders in their own right, but you as a coach, I think, have to model like really healthy, behaviors. Like, what happens if I was here doing this interview and the whole time I'm looking at my iPhone? What and I was distracted and not present? Like, what would that say to you?
Yeah.
So I think how we kind of take care of ourselves and what we do to restore and stay centered, we didn't touch upon that, and I do think that's really important in all professions, in coaching especially important.
Yeah. And do you do something special to achieve that, or?
Yeah, I think I live a very, balance is my mantra in my word that I pick, and I even have a little stone my husband gave me on my desk that says balance, and I tell my clients, balance isn't a state you reach. I don't believe it's you're either moving toward it or you're moving away from it. And your body will tell you when you start to feel like you're moving away. And when I mentioned MAP next week, I don't know if I'm going to go to MAP next week because I've had a lot of travel and I need to make sure I restore and to be away that weekend. I'm not quite sure, and I will decide at the last minute whether that's something I'm going to do because I need that self-care.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's really important so that you can be really helpful and present with your clients and not worried about your own well-being, because your own well-being is taken care of.
Right. And for other people who would be interested in this positive psychology coaching, strengths coaching stuff, what advice would you have for them?
Okay, I actually have 3 pieces of advice, and this was really easy because this is the final chapter in the book that Senya and I are writing.
Right.
It's called Profit from the Positive. What business needs that science knows. So that's the book. And at the very last chapter, it's kind of our advice, and it's 3 things. One is drop the lingo. Like, forget about calling it positive psychology. I mean, sure, there's certain circumstances where you might use that, but don't go floating that around and dropping that like you drop somebody's name. I don't think it flies. Actually, in many businesses, and some, maybe if you're working with Tony Hsieh at Zappos, maybe you can talk about positive psychology and happiness. I think he's the rarity, and maybe that'll shift over time, but I think drop the lingo and translate it for people. And the people that are really curious and want to know, then you can, oh, gosh, I'm all about, well, let me tell you about that study, right? But that's not what I lead with. So drop the lingo is one. The second is focus on results, focus on outcomes, rather than exercises. Oh, I did this really cool exercise. Well, all right, it was a really cool exercise, but who cares unless you can somehow bring it to an outcome or something that's going to benefit the company or the individual or the team. It's got to be, in this type of coaching, business coaching, you've got to show outcomes and show results. So I'd say focus on results. And the third piece of advice is to start small. You don't have to go in and, I'm going to deliver this positive psychology program. It's not a program. I said at the beginning of the interview, it's the lens through which you view the world. Yeah. So I don't come in and say I'm going to do a positive psychology workshop. I might come in and do a strengths-based organizations. What are strength-based organizations all about? And focus in on that. But it doesn't have to be the Big Bang Theory. I call it the backdoor approach. You can come in and do this amazing work and never even call it positive psychology, unless those people are really interested. Right. So I know that's different than how a lot of other people view it, but I've been successful that way, and maybe in the next 10 years it'll change. I was in that inaugural class, and so it's gotten more momentum and whatnot. But I found being the translator is what's worked for me in my business and my clients. Right. So those are my 3 pieces of advice. Right. Thank you. That was the easy part because I've written that for the book. Yeah. When's it coming out? Actually, it's being shopped right now with an agent in New York. It's done. It still has to be. I'm sure they'll copy edit it and stuff, but as soon as it gets a publisher, so. I don't know when that's going to happen, but she said within a year. Right. So hopefully, we're ready. We're ready.
And the title?
Profit from the Positive, and then the subtitle is What Business Needs That Science Knows. Right. So it's bringing our coaching. Senia coaches entrepreneurs. I coach business execs. So it's bringing what we know from that, coaching those 2 different populations, and practices around their team and around themselves that they can, profit from. Right.